Hello, my name is Alkyrius, and on today's episode of Comic Specialism, a very special episode, because today it's going to be in English and audio only. Why? Because I have the amazing Emy Bitner on the other side of the line. Emy, say hello to the people that are watching / listening to you at home.
Hello.
For those of you who do not know the name Emy Bitner, she is the wonderful artist behind the webcomic Trying Human. Emy, tell us a little bit more about Trying Human.
Oh gosh, really put me on the spot. Trying Human is a webcomic I started in 2008 about a girl who's being abducted by aliens, and a lot of conspiracy and ufology stuff is all mixed in with it. So, yeah. It's more complicated than that, but
Obviously,
that's the gist of it.
But, when put on the spot, that's what you'll say. So, that must be true. So, Emy, tell me a little bit more. Like, how did you, get into comics? Like, how did that start for you?
Well, I was always into art and drawing when I was younger, but I was actually more into animated films, especially the Disney, I think it's considered the golden age of films. And I did comics on the side, even just growing up, I always drew comics and read comic books, but I was more, I always thought that the comic thing was a side thing and I'd be an animator, but that's what I went to college for, but what ended up happening was this kind of flipped and reversed, and so now animation is a much more side thing that I almost never do anymore, and comics are what I do all the time. So I just like them. I like the speed of it. I like the language of comics and how they flow and work, and it's just such a unique art form that I don't know how to express it. I just think it's so fascinating. So, yep.
Oh, that's a very thorough answer, I'd say.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Normally I do this with a co-host, and I just ask him what he has for me today, and I let him rant. So I'm used to it, believe me. But I forgot my question. Very clever. No, I was going to ask you. Comics. Obviously, you just elaborated a little bit on, but very specifically, how did you decide that you were going to make a web comic of all things?
I see. Well, I wasn't actually a huge webcomic fan growing up. There were a few I read that sort of, in the way of webcomics, they sort of come and go. They aren't always around forever and stuff. And I did look at them, but I'm trying to remember exactly what made me start doing webcomics in general. I think it was just sort of a way to put my art out there and to practice, storytelling and narratives. And yeah, I'm trying to think. It's been so many years. I've been doing webcomics for over 10 years now. I think it was just, you can't publish it. At that time, you couldn't publish stuff like that, or you had to depend on an overhead or somebody else to do it for you, and I didn't have that option, so the next best thing to get my work out there was to publish it online. So that's free for everybody.
So basically, your product that you put out there is free for everyone and anyone who wants to read it. But a lot of times, you still got to earn a buck. You still got to earn a living. How do you do that and make your webcomic at the same time?
Well, I have a Patreon, but that's sort of a recent development. That I don't even know how old Patreon is in general, but that's sort of new. For years, I just would do the comic and then do commission work on the side, or I would sell art books of Trying Human related work, which art books are more popular in Japan. They're sort of cheesecake art, splash art. I'm not sure what the Dutch word for that is, but it's just like it's like fun art, like posters and things that are all collected into a book, and that was kind of what I was selling and like prints and posters and whatnot, as opposed to the actual comic itself. So the comic itself only recently has started to sort of be what I make money from. Up until then, I was still like a commissioned artist or a contracted artist to other people. So yeah, now it's sort of flipping and reversing, and Trying Human slowly like taking over as like my primary source of income. But that took a long time.
Do you have any advice for any webcomic hopefuls out there?
Yeah, I would say to just never stop. Never stop doing it. I mean, unless it's like really bad or disastrous or something, but only you can judge that, because I've had a ton of people tell me how awful Trying Human is, and I keep thinking to myself, like, well, I just don't know what else to do. I'll just keep doing it. I guess I'm stubborn. But, even like my oldest art, and my oldest story, like there's like old dialogue and stuff in Trying Human, I always have found ways to improve it without completely just being like, well, all of Trying Human is disastrous and just ending it all. So I would say to stick with it as much as possible. And I was a lot more bold about putting it out there when I was younger. Now I'm a little more shy. Like, I don't put it in people's face as much anymore. But if you're that kind, if you like to really push your own work, do it, because it's like really helpful to make a living and have that demand and whatnot. So yes.
Well, that's great advice, actually. You were talking about improving your art, and you are one of the few artists that I know that actually goes back and reworks old pages that they've made in the attempt to improve and remaster it. Is that because you started like making books of it, or was that just a project you started for yourself?
It was a little of both. When I first started Trying Human, I really had no intention of making it into a book. And by the way, I'm sorry, my dog is like making noise, so I hope this doesn't ruin anything. But
oh no, it's fine.
So yeah, I had no intention of making it into a book originally. So a lot of the formatting and the page sizes were really off. Not to mention the art was just not great. And I saw another artist. Oh God bless it, I can't think of her name. I would have to go look up.
Like, what would we know her from? Like, what?
Oh, geez, I'm trying to think of the comic now. It was a comic about like a little goat boy in like a fantasy world, like a little fawn type character. I think the artist who wrote the comic went on to do Phoenix Requiem.
I actually know what comic you're talking about. Like, there's elves involved, and it turns out the goat boy is the elf. Is that
something like that? Yeah, it's been a long time since I've read it, but
exactly
I'm sure folks out there will know what I'm talking about, because she was like one of the progenitors of novel style webcomics online. So I really looked at her work a lot when I was starting out. But when she went to publish that into a book, I don't know if she decided it or if her publisher requested it, but they wanted her to redo chapter 1 for print. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of like the selling point of the book was that you could see chapter 1, all shiny and new, and it wouldn't be available online and whatnot. And I thought, wow, that's like, I'd never really thought about it, but there's nothing stopping you from doing that. I mean, the only difference with me was that I just put it online when I was done. I was like, here it is, have at it, So I thought that was really interesting, because in school I was taught to always go back to my old stuff, and like that, like a piece was never complete. It's just at a resting point, that you always go back and rework your paintings and your illustrations and stuff. But I had never thought to do that with comics. So going back and redoing my old art has always been, or since I started doing it, has been a really important thing to me. It's really helped me improve my work in general. I've learned a lot from it that I think if I had just kept plowing forward, I probably would have learned, but I think it kind of forced me to have to look at things a new way or a different way. So, yeah.
Speaking of artwork still, I've noticed that you have this amazing grasp of simple colors, if that makes sense. It's all very I want to say it fits within a certain palette, and you really manage to get the most out of that palette, which to me is amazing because I'm a colors guy. I need all my colors, all of them. So, how would you say that you go about making a comic in that fashion?
Well, my palettes have always been really simple, only because I really didn't know how to choose colors. So I would have I would use the same red for everybody's red, and I would use the same yellow for everybody's yellow. So I basically had like Roy G. Biv, I would have the rainbow, and that would be it, minus like shading. And it's a lot more obvious, I think, in my old pages that was what I was doing. I've slowly added some more colors. The comic's gotten a lot more saturated. I used to shade a lot with gray, which was something that I don't know why I did that. I don't know how I got away from it, but eventually I did. But the three main grays of the comic, the three main aliens, they're the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. So I think having those primary colors continually show up throughout the comic is a really important piece of sort of the visual storytelling. Mm-hmm. Especially when the grays... Sorry, this is one species of aliens in my comic. If any of you folks read it, then you'll know. But there are this one particular species of aliens that have no emotions, and so every time I show them on their own ship and stuff, it's just these very blank atmospheres. It's just gray and flat, and there's not a lot of color in the scenes and whatnot. And then whenever they go to Earth, it's very saturated, lots of colors, and it takes, whenever they go to Earth, they're usually in New York City. And New York City's kind of a drab place, but I try to make it as colorful as possible in the comic to show the, the contrasting environments. So, yeah, colors are something that I'm still sort of figuring out, I think.
Well, it might be that way, but to an outsider, it looks like you've got a great grasp on what you're doing.
Great. Fake it till I make it.
Fake it till you make it. And we are reaching the 15-minute mark in a hurry, so I'm gonna round this off. Where can people find your comic?
Well, they can find Trying Human on tryinghuman.com, and they can find all my other comics and art books and magazines and things that I've contributed to on introducingemy.com.
And is there anything you'd like to say to your adoring fans?
Thank you for reading. Thank you for giving me a break while I learn how to art.
Well, Emy, it was amazing to have you on my show, and I'd like to thank you very much. And
no problem.
This concludes this week's episode of Comic Specialism in a very special English edition, which is going to be a bitch to subtitle, but I did it to myself. So thank you very much, Emy, and good night.